Hi, my name is Julian Azon, and this is my presentation on Unit 2, which covers most of the 16th century from 1485 to 1603. Now, I don't want to waste any more time, so let's just jump right in. So to get an understanding of the era, it's important to get a grasp of the events up to. The War of Roses was a war fought during the latter portion of the 15th century between two rich aristocratic houses over who had more legitimacy as king, Henry VI of House Lancaster or the Duke of York of House York. The war came to an end when Richard III was crowned king, and then died 2 years later, becoming the last English king to die in battle, an honor which Henry VII missed out on. But he got to be king, so I guess that's not that bad. Henry VII ruled for 20 years, during a time in England when the introduction of the printing press coincided with an increase of the royal court's interest in music, poetry, dance, theater, and masque. The printing press meant more books, made faster and cheaper for the members of the populace that could afford not to starve. Old works from the medieval era were idolized, and increased national pride in the power of English spread. So everyone, yes, even the ladies, were becoming more interested in English language and in literature itself, to the point of beginning to read the Bible themselves, a precursor of independence from the institution of Catholic Church and the Pope for the people. So it may not be so surprising that in 1517 Martin Luther started making a fuss over corruption of the all-powerful Church and began the Reformation, a movement that meant to allow religious authority to reside in Scripture and for salvation to be between an individual and God instead of religious donations. The king at the time of the Reformation was none other than Henry VIII, who was an all-around good guy and backed the movement, seeing it as a wonderful opportunity to free himself from the influence of the church and conveniently misconstrue tons of religious ideas to justify his own ends, the brunt of which was received by his wives. Take it, Henry.
Divorced, beheaded and died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. I'm Henry VIII, I had 6 sorry wives. Some might say I ruined their lives. Catherine of Aragon was one. She failed to give me a son. I had to ask her for a divorce. That broke her poor heart, of course. Young Anne Boleyn, she was 2. Had a daughter, the best she could do. I said she flirted with some other man, and off with the chop went dear Anne. Lovely Jane Seymour was 3, the love of a lifetime for me. She gave me a son, little Prince Ed. Then poor old Jane went and dropped dead. Anne of Cleves came at 4. I fell for the portrait I saw, then laid eyes on her face and cried, she's a horse! I must have another divorce. Catherine Howard was 5, a child of 19, so alive. She flirted with others, no way to behave. The axe sent young Cath to her grave. Catherine Parr, she was lost. By then all my best days were past. I lay on my deathbed, aged just 55. Lucky Catherine, the last, stayed alive. I mean, how unfair. Ugh. Divorced, beheaded and died.
He goes on for a while, but besides killing his wives, Henry VIII was excommunicated also from the church. Not to be discouraged, though, he made new laws to make him the supreme head of the Church of England, forcing all male subjects to conform to his right to church under the Act of Succession. He took all the church money for his own and gave it to the people he liked. This trend of defiance against church authority, or Protestantism, continued after Henry died with his son, Edward, who became deathly ill after 6 years, and named his cousin, Lady Jean Grey, to be queen after him. She was deposed in just 13 days by Edward's half-sister Mary, and Queen Mary, sporting as she is, had Jean Grey beheaded. How nice. Queen Mary, referred to as Bloody Mary, most likely for her interesting beverage choices, did away with Protestantism by burning Protestants at the stake by the dozens. Horrifying and effective. I mean, just look at her. She looks like an evil nun. Mary later died herself after 5 years of rule from illness, and her half-sister Elizabeth ascended her throne. Elizabeth's rule was marked by lethal opposition, her incredible strength of will, her ability to manipulate politics, and her ability to woo the populace. Also, she beat up the Spanish Armada in 1588, which was something. Elizabeth reintroduced Protestantism, again, and radical Catholics, or people tired of the consistent flip-flopping of England's official faiths, tried for her life. But Elizabeth had Walsingham, whose spy network kept Elizabeth's rule absolute and very scary, and she appealed to the populace by depicting herself as an historical female leader, like the biblical Deborah, and keeping political families guessing as she maintained her unmarried status, though it is supposed she was totally crushing on Robert Dudley, and she might marry him if his wife, suffering from a malady of the breast, dropped dead. So tactful. Didn't work out, though. Now, Elizabeth was something, not just as a queen, but as a source of inspiration for the literary and artistic works. There are mountains of paintings and poetry about the Holy Virgin Queen, and she even wrote some poetry herself, supposedly, about pugs. But it was during her lengthy reign that England was stable long enough to really develop in the culture it was coming into, and it was during this period that Elizabethan theatre came about, considered by most to be the richest period of the theatre in England's history, which is quite the statement, and mostly thanks to Shakespeare. During this era of theatre, great open theatres held productions of many sorts, like the history play, which featured an historic event, often war or rebellion, like Shakespeare's The Ides of March.
All fire and every one doth shine, but there's but one in all doth hold his place. So in the world 'tis furnished well with men, and men are flesh and blood and apprehensive. Yet in the number I do know but one, that unassailable holds on his rank unshaked of motion. And that I am he, let me a little show it even in this, that I was constant Simba should be banished, and constant to remain to keep him so.
Oh, Caesar!
Hence wilt thou lift up Olympus?
Great Caesar!
Doth not Brutus bootless kneel?
Speak hands for me!
The Ides of March is also an example of violent tragedy, because here Brutus, about to kill Julius Caesar because he's a dictator, will end up killing himself because of the act.
It too brutally, then fall Caesar.
Liberty! Freedom!
Whoa, geez, guys, give him a minute. He's been dead for like a second. The Elizabethan era was also home to the freestanding public theater. These theaters were grand displays with ceilings exposed to let in the light for the shows they did in the afternoon. One of these grand theaters was called the Globe Theater, and there Shakespeare's works were often performed for most of his life, and even after his death, like this production of Henry IV performed at the refurbished Shakespeare's Globe.
Now, my lady, the hostess, what sayest thou to me?
Marry, my lord, there is a nobleman of court at door would speak with you. Says he comes from your father.
Give him as much as will make him a royal man, and send him back again to my mother!
What manner of man is he?
An old man.
What doth gravity out of his bed at midnight? Shall I give him his answer?
Prithee do, Jack.
Faith, and I'll send him packing.
Now, sirs. Oh, by a lady, you fought fair. So did you, Peter. So did you, Bardolph. You were lions, too. You ran away upon instinct. You will not touch the true prince. No, fie.
Faith, I ran when I saw others run.
Notice how the audience sits around the stage, almost crowded around the edge, making for a very intimate show between the performer and the audience.
He would swear truth out of England, but he would make you believe he'd done it in fight, and persuaded us to do the like.
Yeah, and to tickle our noses with spear grass to make them bleed, and then to beslobber our garments with it and swear it was the blood of true men. I did that, I did not this 7 years before. I blush to hear his monstrous devices.
Villain. Thou stolest a cup of sack 18 years ago, and wert taken with the manor, and ever since thou hast blushed extempore. Thou hadst sword and fire on thy side, and yet thou ranst away. What instinct hadst thou for it?
My lord, do you see these meteors? Do you behold these exhalations?
I do.
What think you they portend?
Hot livers and cold purses.
Collar, my lord, if rightly taken.
Nah, if rightly taken. Halter. Here comes lean Jack, here comes bare bone. How now, my sweet creature of bombast? How long is it ago, Jack, since thou sawest thine own knee?
As you hopefully just appreciated, Shakespeare was very gifted at humor, making use of it in all of his works, tragic or historic. It was this style that appealed to the populace the most, and really made theater a people's event, rather than the people's event. But I've gone on about Shakespeare long enough. The Tudor area saw many other great dramatists, like Christopher Marlowe, an atheist by fire. Seriously, his friend was burned for heresy at the stake. A lot of burning in this era. Marlowe used unrhymed iambic pentameter, which is a unique form of writing in a whole play. It's called unrhymed iambic pentameter because it doesn't rhyme, and iambic pentameter because it uses 5 feet, hence pentameter, and the iambic system where each foot has 2 syllables, one of which is stressed, which sounds weird, but it's easy once you see a clear example, like this one. Ta-tum, 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 ta-tum. Do you hear where it's not stressed and then where it is stressed? Now let's look at a piece from Marlowe's Tamburlaine. From jig ing veins of rim ing mother wits, and such conceits as clownage keeps in pay, will lead you to the stately tent of war, where you shall hear the Scythian Tamburlaine. It may not seem like much, but this style in dramatic works was Marlowe's attack against the older order of things, and he was highly influential. Shakespeare even used some of Marlowe's passages in A Taming of a Shrew.
But stay a while. What company is this? Some show to welcome us to town.
If you listen closely, you can hear how the iambic pentameter keeps the dialogue flowing.
Gentlemen, importune me no farther, for how I firmly am resolved, you know. That is, not to bestow my youngest daughter before I have a husband for the elder.
Now, there's plenty of other great dramatists, like George Peele, Robert Greene, John Lilly, Anthony Munday, Thomas Kidd, and George Crasgongd, who all contributed to the great era of Elizabethan theater, but we don't have time for them, so let's move on. Instead, let's talk about the church and how highly religious groups like the Puritans of the era accused the theater of promoting sex, foul language, immorality, basically what you hear Fox News complaining about all the time. But what's funny is that they said the use of young boys playing women's parts was wrong because it would excite illicit sexual desire. I think they doth protest too much. Besides theater, music was also in full swing during the 16th century, with pieces like Jesu Corona Virginum, composed around 1497 and often sung by nuns, not the evil ones, part of the order called Poor Clares, who locked themselves away in their churches. Imagine walking through the streets of London and hearing this eerily beautiful sound emanating through their walls. But more than religious works, poetic works began to emerge as well, reflecting elegance and a more inner human beauty, like John Donlan's works. Downland was one of the more important composers of the 16th century, and in this poetic piece about the simple peddler, singing about his wares and soul, and though his wares are precious, his honesty and loyalty are greater still. So, we've only covered a fraction of the expansive culture of England. I mean, there's jousts, pageants, executions, tournaments, executions, masks, executions, and bear baiting. But like all things, the Elizabethan era comes to an end with her death in 1603, replaced by King James VI. But the contributions of the era are not forgotten. On the contrary, the works of the artist and the efforts of the scholars to expand rhetoric and the English language as an expressive art form go on to influence Francis Bacon, John Locke, and Samuel Johnson in their respective works that revolutionized their eras. And there's so much more of the Tudor period to discover. It really was a rich tapestry of art and character and song. It'd be a tragedy to miss out on its fruits. And that really brings us to an end. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.